l'onorevole Stephen Mullighan, Ministro del Tesoro, Ministro per l'Industria dello Spazio e della Difesa e Ministro per la Polizia. Buongiorno, Stephen. Thank you for coming on to Radio Italia Uno.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you and your listeners.
Yeah, so I gave a reasonably long list of portfolios that you hold, not only the Treasury, which is big enough as it is, then you've got defence and space industries. I can see the synergies there. Police, you picked that up how long ago? Just a few months ago now, yeah?
That's right, yeah. We had the former police minister is not standing at the next election and didn't want to continue on as a cabinet minister. So amongst his responsibilities, I've taken on police, which is a terrific opportunity for me. It's a really important part of government's role in the community is providing policing services and keeping the community safe. And also from my perspective, it's nice to have another more operational portfolio aside from what I do as Treasurer, understanding some of the impact that we can have in the community through such an important portfolio.
Yes, I remember having some private conversations with Carmel Zollo, who also had the prisons in her portfolio. And that was obviously something that kept her going all the time at the operational level.
That's right.
So how's it been different then, dealing with police as on top of the other portfolios?
Well, I think most of us would be familiar with police from how we see them out in the community, whether it's patrolling areas of really high activity in the city, or keeping our roads safe and catching motorists doing the wrong thing. But of course, we also see them on the television news each night, apprehending some of the worst criminals in our society for some of the most horrendous crimes. But also what's really changed for policing in the last 10 or 15 years in particular has been the increase of time that police have needed to respond to family and domestic violence. And that's been a real challenge for not only the community generally, but for how the police can respond to that, making sure that they're not only catching the offenders and dealing with them appropriately, but also supporting the victims. And so we've got very high demands on our police at the moment. And like any employer, they're having a real battle to make sure they can attract people to the police force and hang on to them in a very tight labour market.
Yes, and I guess the Royal Commission into Domestic Violence will probably have some relevant considerations. We'll look forward to when that's due to be released. Okay,
that's right.
So yes, we are reasonably exactly 12 months out from an election. Usually it's around this stage, around the 18th, 17th of March.
That's right. It's 12 months to the day, actually.
Okay.
So in exactly 12 months' time, we'll be casting our ballots for the next state government and for our local members of parliament. And today there was now what's become a traditional debate between the Premier and the Leader of the Opposition about what their respective pitches are to the community.
Yes, so that was held around lunchtime today, I think with the press club. Can you give us your unbiased view of what happened there?
Well, I'll do my best, but I think I am a bit biased, of course. I work closely with the Premier, with Peter Malinauskas, and I do think he's doing a good job, and he's led a government which is made some really positive changes for the community, and there's a bit of momentum about South Australia and a bit of enthusiasm from the community about the direction our state's heading in, perhaps for the first time in quite a while. But it was interesting to hear that contrasted with some of the issues that the opposition raised. Obviously, we're living in the middle of some challenging times with cost of living driven by higher interest rates. South Australia is experiencing some of the driest agricultural conditions we've had for a long time, and so it was interesting to hear those particular issues get debated as well.
Yes, I hadn't really appreciated how important was the drought in South Australia, but there's also a deeper issue going on with the farmers, partly reflected in today's newspaper, but your recent announcement around housing developments. So there's a bit of a tussle going on between housing development and farmers and the use of agricultural land. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a good point to raise because I think all of your listeners would probably be aware of just how expensive housing has become over the last 4 or 5 years. And that reflects that we're just simply not building enough homes here in South Australia. As houses get more expensive, it gets harder and harder for younger South Australians to afford housing and to get into home ownership. So we've tried to make it an important priority for the government to release more land, to connect that land up to utilities, including water, and get that land ready for houses to be built on it, because we think that increasing supply will moderate that price growth, but quite simply make more housing available. And of course, on the fringes of Adelaide, north and south, some of that land has traditionally been used for farming and primary production purposes. And farmers, I think, I guess, understandably, have a view that they're losing some of their productive agricultural land for housing. But I do think on balance, it's the right thing to do to be making more land available so that young South Australians in particular still feel like they've got home ownership within their grasp.
Yes, and now, as I said, I haven't watched, I didn't follow the debate today, but I think maybe when the Premier was making his announcements around the urban developments, he might have put out the slogan for next year's campaign, "We choose to act." Is that the line that you're taking?
Well, I don't know whether that will be our campaign slogan, but I think we're keen to demonstrate to the community that when we're confronted with issues while we're in government, we will be quick to act and act in a way that helps our state through that challenge. And since the new year, for example, we've seen the steelworks at Whyalla come under more and more pressure, suffer what we understood to be less and less maintenance and upkeep, and have their very existence threatened by that situation. So we've chosen to act. We were just talking about how we've acted when it comes to building more housing, and we've also tried to act very positively to invest a lot more into our health system, to open more beds and employ more doctors and nurses and ambulance staff. So when we've had these challenges, I think we've got a good track record of acting to try and combat those challenges and make a positive difference for the community.
Actually, one of the topics, given we're talking about health, is ramping. I only yesterday, my mother had to go to hospital. We've been very lucky between both my parents. We've never been ramped at the RA. But how are you progressing? It's work in progress, I'm sure. But
It is. Yeah, I mean, we've still got a lot more work to do. There's no doubt about that. But at the time of the last election, the reason we wanted to make health and the issue of ramping a focus was because we were seeing too many times that people were calling for an ambulance because they needed emergency assistance, and that ambulance simply wasn't able to turn up. There weren't enough ambulances, and the ambulances that were available were often stuck on the ramp. And I think the change that's happened over the last 3 years is that the ambulance service is now far more reliably turning up to respond to emergencies when people are calling them from home or work or wherever they're getting into a situation where they need that emergency medical assistance. And if we can get an ambulance to somebody who's in need, well, that gives them a much better chance of getting through that medical emergency than if they're left on their own. So we are making some positive progress, but yes, the metric that gets used to measure the amount of time that ambulances are stuck at the hospital trying to discharge a patient, we still haven't successfully tackled all of that problem, but in the last year we opened 150 extra hospital beds. We're due to open another 180 hospital beds this year, and to give you an idea, that's more beds in those 2 years than is in the entire Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So we're adding a lot more capacity to our hospital system, but we recognise there's still more work to be done.
And maybe finding ways to avoid people entering the system as an important buffer. Now you've got, okay, it's 12 months. Your budget is due normally in June.
That's
So,
right.
what general, I'm sure you can't tell us what you're working on specifically, but do you have some general principles that you're working on that you can tell us?
Yeah, it's been a focus of the government to get the state budget back into surplus. Under the previous government, admittedly, while they were grappling with COVID, the budget fell into deficit, and a lot of debt came onto the state's books as a result. And we know that we need to be taking on more borrowings as a state in order to help us build the new Women's and Children's Hospital and to complete the South Road corridor. And so it's important for us not just to get the budget back into surplus, but to try and keep it in surplus. It's going to be a challenge this year, Antonio, because we've had to commit such a huge amount of money to support Whyalla, and we're continuing to spend more and more resources in health and in other key areas of community services. So the work that I'm doing at the moment is trying to manage those different pressures on the budget to try to keep the budget in surplus, and at the same time make room for some further, I guess, positive initiatives, some new programs of spending, which we think will continue carrying the state forward to a more prosperous future. We've got a lot of exciting economic developments now in our state. We're the home of naval shipbuilding for our Australian Defence Forces. We've got a booming defence industry even outside of shipbuilding. There's a lot of construction work coming on those two major government projects, and there's a lot of inbound investment into business generally from people who are quite excited about what's going on with South Australia at the moment. We want to make sure that we capitalise on that momentum that our state has, and hopefully our budget gives us the opportunity to continue that momentum.
Yeah, okay, I'll come back to defence and maybe more space in a second. What's the significance to the state of the Whyalla Steelworks? Now, I understand there's the strategic level issues for the national level for certain the specific industry. What impact are you seeing or might expect to see of the Whyalla Steelworks if they were to have to close down, or if there's renewed growth?
Yeah, well, this was the concern that we had that caused us to act in the way that we have to support the steelworks continue on, but under different leadership, away from GFG and its owner Sanjeev Gupta. Whyalla is not just the steelworks, but it's also the mining operation for very high quality iron ore, which is used to make that steel. And the mining operation has always been not only very productive, but very, very profitable. And the combination of the mining effort and the steelworks has enabled both of those endeavours together to generate a really profitable business. But what we've seen in recent times is the plant was not as productive as what it has been in the past, and there wasn't enough investment in it. And if we didn't have that plant continue on, then our country would lose the capacity to make what are called long-form steel products, and these are the basic materials used in a lot of civil and commercial construction projects. For example, we'll be using a lot of Whyalla steel in the South Road Tunnels project, and also on the Women's and Children's Hospital project as well. And in the current environment globally, in our view, it just doesn't seem it doesn't seem right to be in a situation where our country can't produce some basic forms of steel that we need for the functioning of our economy. And to give you an idea about how productive the output of Whyalla is for our economy, the combination of the mining and the steelworks is in the order of $1 to $1.5 billion a year, which is a bit over 1% of our entire economic output. So to lose the steelworks and its mining operation would be a huge hit to our economy, and would also see thousands of jobs lost in Whyalla. And now that the government's acted, it is night and day compared to what it was before we acted in terms of how people feel in Whyalla. They're feeling very upbeat now, and they feel like there's a positive future, whereas before they were very worried that there was no future for the steelworks and for Whyalla.
Yes, and I'm guessing, hoping that the geopolitical developments might add extra value to holding that plant, which I guess, I don't know if the plant in itself, but Whyalla is an important part of your potential hydrogen view for the state, major projects up north.
Well, that's right. And, we were pursuing our hydrogen jobs plan on the basis that we would have a plant which could produce hydrogen, and that hydrogen could be used to replace natural gas as part of the smelting efforts at the steelworks. And given the dire situation that the steelworks found itself in, we had to take the decision to defer the hydrogen jobs plan so that we could use the funds that we'd allocated towards it to rescue the steelworks. But once we get the steelworks in the hands of a more capable, more financial owner and operator, that'll give us the opportunity to go back and re-agitate that hydrogen opportunity, because we really do believe that that will be of huge economic benefit for the state going forward in the future.
Yes, well, let's hope that can be rekindled. I said I'd talk briefly about space. I noticed that Fleet Space is making some new investments. Seem a bit strange to me, but obviously I don't understand where the synergies are. What are we doing specifically for this to develop the space sector in South Australia?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, we're home to the Australian Space Agency and a number of fast-growing companies which are busy in the areas of space. We've got companies which are launching satellites to be able to monitor the Earth, both for either military or commercial and domestic uses. Fleet Space has been really successful raising money so that they can expand their operations, and they're broadening out the use of satellites and the communication technologies between the Earth and those satellites into areas including mining and resource exploration. And we've got other companies here who are developing communications technologies to provide some redundancy should there be a major conflict globally which impacts the existing satellite system. So South Australia is fast becoming known as somewhere where we've got very advanced companies with very sophisticated capabilities to support both military applications, but also enable major commercial operations like miners become more productive and generate more economic value for our state, as well as export to other countries. So it's a really exciting time, particularly for kids who are interested in space, to understand what those opportunities are and hopefully tailor their studies accordingly and take advantage of what will be very well paid long-term jobs in the sector.
Yes, indeed. And now just to close off, remember the very first time we met you, actually there were two things, but I keep on quoting you when you said that by far the most important topic that came up when you were door knocking was on-street or off-street parking. But anyway,
Yes.
I'll set that aside and talk about that with local councillors. But you also said you had a very specific role in the sauce making operations. Have you done the sauce this year yet?
We have. We did it a few weeks ago. We had a smaller batch this year. We only made about 110 bottles, but that will be that should, fingers crossed, just be enough to get us through until the next year. And of course, it's been hard for everyone this year with the situation with the tomatoes being grown in South Australia with the virus that we had there. So I hope all of your listeners were able to have a successful sauce making season this summer as well.
Cool. Okay, well, thank you very much, Stephen Mullighan, Treasurer, Minister for Defence and Space Industries and Minister for Police.
Thank you so much.